Max Kerman, lead singer of Arkells, has been on The Gist many times. Every time you hear Not Even Mad, that's his theme music that he wrote for us. But let us face facts. Max is a rock star. In Canada, he is very, very big. How big? Well, in Hamilton, Ontario, by a popular vote, they named a snowplow after him, the Max Kerminator. Now, you have to understand, in Canada, having a snowplow named after you, it's like in the U.S. having a stamp named after you. You're a picture on a stamp. And, of course, in Canada, there's only one person whose picture is allowed on the stamp. And in America, you have to be dead. So the snowplow thing, pretty much the world's highest honor in Canada. I do have to say, when I talk to Max on the show, I get very excited. Sometimes when I go see one of his shows, I get very excited, but a little uneasy because all I want to do is plow ahead and pepper him with questions. But now I don't feel bad because I read his new book, Try Hard, Creative Work in Progress, and he reveals he does the same thing. He meets Shania Twain after a show and he just plows ahead with questions. Or at Coachella, he meets fellow songwriter and fellow Max, but fellow snowplow eponym Max Martin, just plows ahead. Let's do it. Let's do it again, Max. Let's plow ahead.
Let's plow ahead. I will say, the assignment you gave me to write a theme song for Not Even Mad, that was such a great creative exercise for me. And it really got my blood flowing because, I'm used to writing, 3.5 minute rock and roll pop songs. Yeah. But the instructions you gave me, like you wanted it to feel sort of like dramatic, like some kind of like highbrow newscast. Yeah, and I remember thinking like, hey, this is great. And I sat down at the piano and with my left hand, I had like the bass part in mind, and then I was singing the melody, and then I kind of got it together, and I went over to my friend Derek's place and we recorded it. But it was fun because it was a different kind of musical assignment than my.
So that's how you write. You write on piano. The left hand's the bass part. The right hand's you sing the melody. The right hand's the rhythm on that same piano that you record most of your songs. Yeah. The broken ragtime piano.
Yeah, sometimes I use a guitar, but piano I just seem to like. It brightens me up a bit, so I like the piano.
And would you say your guitar playing is better than your piano playing?
They're both pretty average. There's a part in the book where I used to agonize over equipment, like musical equipment. Yeah. I was like, if I just got that great Fender Stratocaster or that Gibson J45, I'd really start to practice. But that is not the way it works. It's like you either have the desire to practice scales or you don't. And when I did finally get that nice guitar, my guitar playing did not improve at all. So I was like, I'm fine with whatever old junk instruments around I can make do.
Yeah, every snotty 12-year-old's like, I need that good guitar. And then the parents justify it. Maybe he'll practice more, and it never works like that.
Nope.
Is that's interesting. I'm glad that you got some creative juice out of it because I think we gave you no money, but maybe we threw $2 to your engineer.
The pleasure was mine. No, I think you paid me a little bit. No, whatever it was, so. I enjoyed it, and that's irrelevant.
It's only the right thing to do. And
also in my book, I mentioned how I'm afraid of my bank account, so I wouldn't really know. I don't want to know what's in there.
I mean, it's so bad that like when you have to split a check, you have to text your manager to like send a pal $60. Is that it?
Yeah, it's sort of embarrassing, but it's true. It's true.
Yeah. And just so everyone understands, that's $60 Canadian. So we're only talking about like $52.
Yeah.
So it's also interesting that you said you appreciated or got something out of the assignment. I mean, that is how creativity works best, right? It's freedom within constraint. It's some parameters, and then within those parameters, finding how much space that you have within them. And so the question is, and you get into this, is what do you do to impose the parameters on yourself? How do you, as a creative, know how much imposition that you want to have for allowing the creative process to flourish?
I've been very lucky that there's been a structure in my working life from a very early age. So the band met in university, and we very quickly, started gigging and practicing. And at the end of our fourth year of university, we got signed to a label. So we had a due date immediately. Because I think a lot of artists who aren't as lucky, and I do think it's a lot of luck, have to sort of wander around imagining, it's like, when will this thing come out? But for us, it's like, we finished in April and our debut record came out in October. And so we had a timeline to adhere to, which really focused us. And And even with writing the book, it's such a privilege to be able to work with a publisher and they go, okay, we have this date in mind circled, and we have to have the book end in like 9 months to a year before. So I don't know, the deadlines have been very helpful and help create more work, because once you check one thing off your list, then you can get to the next.
What about non-time deadlines, like ways? So you relatively recently began working with co-songwriters, which at one point you thought was anathema to what you do, but they have a different process, and the process might have some restrictions, but that works for you or can work.
Yeah. So for the first 3 records, the band just wrote as a unit, and I'd usually bring in some acoustic versions and then we jam it out together. And that's the way I thought bands were supposed to work. But then I forget who, but somebody convinced me, oh, you should go to LA. There's so many great songwriters out there. You might learn a thing or two. And on the first session, I wrote a song with this guy, John Fields. The beginnings of a song. I want to make it clear that the band always has their fingerprints on it. But the beginnings of a song called My Heart's Always Yours, which has since gone on to be one of our biggest songs. It's like been played at first dances at weddings, and we play it every night on tour. And it's this great moment during the show. But I haven't seen John Fields since that day. But I was like, oh, isn't that interesting that I can have a creative spark with a person that I met literally for 5 hours, and I learned so much from him. So John Fields, who's written songs with the Jonas Brothers and Jimmy Eat World, and has a long, prolific career. We started on the verse and the chorus, which I had, and then for the chorus, he said, try to hit this high note. And I was like, I never would have thought to hit that high F, but I did. He coached me through it. And then when it came time to sing, I was going to go into the vocal booth in his little studio. And he said, no, you can sing it right out here. And I'd been trained for 10 years. No, if you're going to do vocals, you are resigned to the vocal booth. It always felt like a prison to me, too. I never liked spending time in the vocal booth. It always felt unnatural. You don't like
recording studios in general.
I don't like recording studios. It's such an unnatural, strange place. But I get it, because you want to, conserve the quality of the vocal take. But he said, no, do you know that Bono sings his vocal through a really ordinary microphone in the control room with the other guys hanging out, and doesn't even have headphones on. The speaker is playing back the instrumental, and he's casually singing the song. And even though it's not the perfect vocal quality, because there's other interference in there, the performance is good. And so I go, oh, I didn't know that. And so from there, I go, oh, there's actually so much to learn when you are doing continuing education. And it's funny, I talk about my dad in a chapter in the book where he's a social worker, but he puts on these continuing education conferences. So this idea of continuing education has been in my bones from a very young age, which I think is important.
Do you hit that high F in concert?
It took a while. It really took a while to get there. The first 6 months of singing that song, it was unnatural, but then your body readjusts itself, and now I can hit it just fine.
There's a lot of parts in the book, although you don't stop and have a distinct chapter on this, where what the creative breakthrough is getting you outside your comfort zone. You just talked about one. Like, I wouldn't think to write with someone else, and then I did, and it sparked something. And another one was early on, you had done 2 albums, and they were straight ahead rock and roll, but also, I think, lyrically, you had some sort of commitment to, I'm not going to say hardcore, but you were reluctant to give in to romanticism. And then at one point, you start working with another producer, and he says, we used drum machines for the first time. The songs were more heartfelt and romantic. There was no way a song with the sentimental lyric of 1111 or Dirty Blonde would have been able to exist on the first 2 albums. And that blew my mind, because I'm not going to say you're known for the sentimental lyric, but when I first started listening to you, High Noon and Forward, this was absolutely part of the DNA of Arkells, that you would do a sweet song that captured a moment probably from when you were younger. And I never even thought that at some point you were reluctant to do it. But now,
well, we came from a scene, right? So the music that we listened to that shaped a lot of our first couple records is like this great era of Canadian indie rock. And so it's this generation just a little bit older than us. So I'm talking about Broken Social Scene, the Weaker Thans, the Constantines, that whole lineage of bands that existed during that time. And those bands were like particularly like arty, it's like the lyrics weren't necessarily right up in front of your face. It's like they weren't particularly sentimental, those bands, the Constantines, and bands we love. But I've always loved that kind of music too. It's like, because I'm such a fan of just pop music, from the 50s onward.
Yeah.
But
like your favorite band, or one of the only bands you listened to for years, was the Beatles. And
was the Beatles.
You would not think someone who's a huge fan of the band who wrote "I Want to Hold Your Hand" was against treacly poppy music,
right? But I think it goes to show that when you are immersed in a particular scene, you get tunnel vision, for better and for worse. It's like your influence, and I think the influence of those bands really helped in the early days. But then after the first couple of records, it took working with an outside producer, Tony Hoffer in LA. Who said, no, it's okay to sing about love. It's okay to sing about that moment when you're just like in bed with your girlfriend and you're feeling so much love in your heart. That's okay. And that wouldn't have passed the sniff test in the early days. So again, it was just like I needed to be exposed to things beyond our little world.
Do you think you were being true, or if you really examined it, you would probably have said, what am I doing? But subconsciously, were you holding fealty to your bandmates, your fans, the image of yourself, the other bands in the scene? Who did you think you were betraying or going against by preventing yourself from writing a song like 1111?
You know what it is? I'll tell you exactly what it is. Okay, so and I mentioned this in the book, there is this message board. This is like pre-Twitter, pre-Facebook, pre-everything, called Still Post, STILLE Post. And it was a discussion board for Canadian indie rock, like Ontario indie rock, Southern Ontario indie rock. It was quite specific. But they listed all the upcoming shows at the club.
18th and Main Street, Hamilton indie rock, yes.
And I was fascinated by the board. I didn't really participate. Everyone was a little older and a little cooler. But and the conversations and the punditry, all of it was very juicy and fun. And people were talking about what bands were better than others, what bands were shit, what bands, had potential. And those avatars, those usernames really played a big part in my thinking. Because anytime I wrote a song, I'd go, are the people on Still Post going to think this is cool or lame? Are the people on Still Post going to think that my shirt is cool or lame? And I let that invade my thinking. And to this day, I still have a version of that. And I want to make it very clear. When I'm working on anything, I become paralyzed. When I think of a really smart, clever, but slightly cynical freelance journalist who spends a lot of time on Twitter and what they might think about my next idea, I become paralyzed. I go, oh, that is lame. No, it's lame.
That's why they call it pitchfork.
You right?
That's what they're doing to you.
It's that tone. And by the way, and the ironic part about that is that I like Pitchfork. I think a lot of their commentary of journalists is right up my alley. We probably vote the same way. We probably have many things in common. But anytime I wanted to do something that was a little more vulnerable, a little more hard on my sleeve, a little more smiley, even.
Yeah.
I always go, they're going to think it's lame. So as soon as I got over that, I think the music became a lot more free. And that's sort of kind of probably started on the third record.
So how do you know what to stick to? So far we've talked about freeing up a conception that you were sticking to about how to write a song. You changed that and it helped. Then at another point we talked about the kind of songs you could write. We just talked about why you thought that was the right kind of song. You changed, you showed some flexibility, and it was good. Yet there still can't be that easy. It can't be that every principle you have must be abandoned. So that's the question. How do you know the things that you're sticking to, that you're going to stick to forever, that absolutely work for you?
I think it comes down to the first paragraph of the book is, am I entertained or not? It's that simple. It's like if we were still putting on the same shows we did when we started, which is black skinny jeans, plaid shirt, 5 of us on stage, thrashing around, playing indie rock songs, I wouldn't be entertained. I'd be so bored. I'd be so bored of that. So then the question goes, okay, how do you entertain yourself? Well, wouldn't it be interesting if we had horns on some, okay, maybe we're bring some horns in the mix. Maybe we're touring with horns if we can afford it. But what if it's not always my voice? What if we bring in some feature singers? Oh, that's kind of interesting. What if I demand everybody learns choreography for certain moments of the show? What if I want the show to be really directed? What if I want the show, especially when we're playing big shows up in Canada, that it's more of a theater production than it is just indie rock guys coming on stage. And when I say theater production, I don't necessarily mean a musical, though I do love musicals. I'm thinking Bruce Springsteen. Springsteen's show is so choreographed. It's a perfect mix of the spontaneous moments where he's looking at the crowd, he sees a sign, he brings the sign on stage, he shows the sign to the band, they launch into that song. Which is also an act of preparation, might I add. Like being able to pull off that magic trick means that the band has to know all 300 of Springsteen's songs. I went out for dinner with Jake Clemens after Springsteen played in Toronto recently. Jake is
the saxophonist,
the saxophone player, Clarence's nephew. And they played some deep cut the night before. And I said, did you guys run that in sound check? She said, nope, we just had to be ready. So like this idea of preparation is...
And this isn't a guy who was in the E Street Band from the days they were on E Street. This is, sure, his uncle was Clarence, but he's joined within the last, 10 years. Yeah.
Oh, he's had to learn all the material. So to me, that is how I'm keeping myself entertained, is not by doing the same thing. So I think it's like as soon as something becomes a little sleepy or a little dusty, that's when I go, okay, it's time to think about something else, something new.
Yeah, and of the Springsteen show, and we've talked about our mutual love of Springsteen, which is, by the way, not just apparent in much of Max's music, lyrics, but the videos, there'll be a Springsteen reference on the wall a third of the time. So we talked about this, and after I saw you at the show, this is when I was peppering you with questions, and what do you do to get the crowd going, and how much to do different things that you were doing that show. You were doing a request thing with laundry, and how much does that work? And I was fascinated. I'm fascinated by the showmanship and how much a lead singer of a rock band really puts into what's supposed to seem spontaneous and organized. And one thing that you and I both agree with, and I was thinking more of comedy, but you write in the book, how Springsteen comes on stage and the beginning songs that aren't even Bruce songs, just like the non-Arkells songs that play beforehand, are clearly curated, comes on stage, Max plays the drums, boom, they're right into it. Really important. And in your book, you write about it's a small detail, but a welcome change from the indie rock scene, where bands often clumsily tune their guitars for the first 45 seconds of the show, completely killing any buzz generated by their arrival on stage. And for me, it's like you go see a comedy show, and it's not one of these shows where the agreement is you're watching people work out stuff. You see a comedy show, and the comic says, so what else? What else? I hate that. You're a professional comedian. Have the stuff memorized. Don't tell me what else, what else. And so I wonder, do you think there is definitely a vibe to indie rock? And I guess the audience is, do you think they like it or just expect it? Or another way to ask the question is, so many successful acts seem not to get this. Do you think they thrive in spite of that? Or maybe for some acts, that sort of let's show the seams of how we're doing it is actually a successful strategy?
I'd say I disagree a little bit, because I think most successful acts don't do it. I think that's one of the things that separates a successful act and a not successful act, how you prepare to walk on the stage. And I think that little moment is indicative. Now, don't get me wrong. You could go to a show at Madison Square Garden and in the beginning is clumsy and not great. But I do think most bands have enough reps that they go, okay, how do we want to make the intro look and feel? So I think a lot of, like, I'll use Arcade Fire as an example. It's like, they really separated themselves from their peers because in those early shows, they came out swinging. The entrance they'd make to the stage would be, all 12 of them or however many they were touring with would be walking through the crowd, banging a drum. It's like, okay, that is a thoughtful entrance. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why they've had the success that they had, because it's just like their determination to make each moment count.
I also like the parts of your book where you talk about stage banter. And an early episode of The Gist was I had a listener who I forgot even how it came up. But one of my listeners, Dylan, is a great guitar player, plays in Broadway shows. But when he did live shows, he wasn't great at banter. So we brought in a singer, a very successful singer, and she was a Sharon Van Etten. You know her?
Oh yeah.
She was a banter coach. She talked him through the banter. And I just loved the fact that what is supposed to be, or maybe when we go to see a show and the person on stage engages in banter, we know they didn't just think of it from the top of their head, but it's a little different from when you go to see a play or when you go to see anything else where someone is talking. There's the idea that maybe this is somewhat from the top of their head, or it is riffing. But I love the fact that you get into how you craft your banter, how you talk to others about your banter, the time that other big musicians have laid down a riff on you before a show. You go to see the show and there's the riff on stage. I love that.
Yeah.
Were you reticent to share that?
No, that's my favorite part because the book is about process and the book's about pulling back the curtain on how you do things. And in my case, I have lots of ideas, but I don't know what the shape of the story ought to be, when it comes to my banter. And also, I'm really bad with buttons. I'm very good at knowing what I'm not good at.
Yeah.
So what I do is Mike Veerman, who I host the Best Hang podcast with, who's such a brilliant writer and knows my brain really, really well. When I'm on tour, I just give him a ring and I go, hey, Mike, I'm in Halifax right now. Okay, I want to work out what I want to say at the top of the show after the second song. I want to mention that, okay, we've played at all these other venues, but this is going to be the biggest time we've ever played in Halifax. And I want to be able to end my big sermon on a bang. How do I do that? And Mike, because he understands the math of storytelling in a much more focused way than I understand. He walks me through it and he punches parts up and then he's like, this is what you'd say at the end of your story. And I go, oh, perfect, great. And that's why the collaboration is so much fun. And also, it just beats whatever else I'd be doing that day in Halifax when I wait that 9 hours from when I wake up to go on stage. It's like, what am I doing with my time otherwise? Do you know what I mean?
That's Halifax specific.
No, but it's most places, Halifax
if you're in Red Deer, you can't say the same. Have you ever done that, by the way? Confused Moncton for Prince Edward Island while on stage?
I've done it twice, and they've both been egregious. Do you want to hear?
Tell me.
One time we were playing in Glasgow, and I said, it's great to be back in England.
Oh my God. That's the number one thing Scottish people have.
It's the worst. It is the worst possible.
You have never,
and by the way,
you can never say English to any Scotsman without them saying actually.
And by the way, the second it left my mouth, I go, oh my God. Oh my God. I knew immediately. And then the other time, I think we were in Calgary. And I said, Edmonton, how's it going? And Edmonton and Calgary are fierce provincial rivals. They really hate each other. So that was a bad one, too.
Could you cover it up? Is what I said when I was at Northlands Arena. But here at the Saddle Dome.
You're good, Mike. You're good.
Oh, yeah. I know I don't know all the CFL stadia, but I know which one has the space between Red Rider and which one doesn't. Rough Rider.
Rough Rider,
yeah. They're now the black and reds, right? Isn't one of the Rough Riders red and black?
In Ottawa. Yeah.
Your band's one of the biggest CFL favorites, I would say.
Well, we played the Grey Cup halftime show, which was a huge honor, which we get into the book because it's this great. So the halftime show is like the Canadian version of the Super Bowl for our American listeners, and so it's a big television audience, and we had 14 minutes on stage to kind of show off what we got. And it was a great opportunity because it was like, okay, everything we've ever learned about performing and also performing on television. So that means working with the producers and all the production people to make sure that they're cutting to the right moments. Everything we've ever learned is going to go into this show. So, and we called the Lumineers and they came up and did a song with us. And I get into it in the book, but it was like, I look at that as what an amazing privilege just to have this chance to workshop something for a month straight and to put everything we've ever learned into one thing.
And it's definitely not what you do. So talk about challenging your comfort zone. But so it's some parts of what you do. The music is what you do and how you'd arrange the sets a little different. I guess I mean sets in both ways. But there's a lot of movement and a lot of running around in the background to get to the next thing. And then you talk about, but if the TV people aren't coordinating and they see us running around in the background, it's all going to be ruined. You think of that when you watch it on TV, but when you really step back, how many production crews or how many people in the world really do that? How often does it come up, a Super Bowl-esque halftime show?
I mean, it's very, very rare. I mean, we've done television appearances where we've played one song, but to do 14 minutes, that's a whole other exercise. And the one thing I realized over the years is that something can feel great in the room, but feel terrible on TV. We were at the Junos a couple weeks ago, and Sum 41, a beloved Canadian band, they were getting inducted to the Canadian Music Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Junos are the Grammys.
That's right.
Times the Northern Parallel, yeah.
And I was in the room, and their performance was so good. It was so good. But then I think on TV, the mix wasn't great. And people complained, like, oh, these guys don't sound great. And I was like, no, I was in the room. They sounded amazing. So there's so many things out of your control, which is why you have to be like super sharp on everything.
Earlier, we talked about how you thought if you got maybe the great new guitar, you'd play more. And you're actually inspired by picking up weird instruments and instruments that don't work. And basically, I'll quote the book, I make every effort to avoid all superstitious instincts. For musicians, it's easy to approach your instrument and wonder if the universe is on your side and if the time is right. Superstitions can come in the form of many excuses that don't help much. But you're a big sports guy. That was your first love. Many of your commissions have been to either do things at sports stadia or for a sports team, or a sports team takes one of your bands. So there's a big sports and music intermingling with Arkells. Why do you think, I have some theories, but sports people are really superstitious and it helps them. And for you as a musician, but a creative person, quite the opposite. So I have some theories about this, but why do you think there's that difference?
Are they? I guess there's a lot of superstition in sports.
Yeah, like a pitcher's preparation, they'll never deviate, or Wade Boggs always eating fried chicken before a meal, or talk to Nick Nurse or many of these other coaches. They have to touch the same thing every day. I mean, you have rituals, but they're really superstitious quite often.
I guess so, but I'd also add that the amount of time they just put in just working on their craft, as an athlete is probably 99% of their day. And the 1% is the ritual part. Right. So I'd say it's like, if that makes them feel better, great. But it's like, if they didn't train and they just stuck to their like fried chicken, or, how they point to the sky before they walk on. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't mean anything. Yes. It wouldn't mean anything. So I'm happy they have that, but I don't think it contributes at all to their success.
No, but if psychologically there's the placebo effect, and if they think it does, and if they got out of the comfort zone, I mean, watch a guy on a free throw line, they'll have to do certain things, and the routine moors them. I think it's about what is the value of routine in professional sports, and it's really valuable, right? It's once you in sports demonstrate a skill, you have that skill, and what you want to do is replicate that skill. So routine is a virtue in the highest echelon of professional sports. Even something that looks creative, like, figure skating. They can't deviate from that, so they must love the routine. Whereas with creative people, routine isn't exactly the enemy, and this is where it gets interesting and ambiguous. There's some amount of routine that you need, but you also have to do the things to break away 5, 10, 30 degrees from the routine. So that's where I think maybe superstition for a musician like you would not help, or does not help.
Also, I think the difference between a creative and an athlete is there's already too much time to contemplate things as a creative. Like an athlete doesn't have that much time. Like a creative person's job is literally to sit in a chair or sit in front of a piano and to think. And I think that's too much time. I think with an athlete, it grounds them while they're in the midst of sprinting their heart out, or going into battle in some way. You know what I mean? So I think the reason why I'm a little dubious about superstitions when it comes to creative people, it's like you already have too much. You're already in your head already. So like, if you can get out of your head and into your fingers and just get into a flow state, that's actually just a better way to be. Like, too much contemplation, I don't think is helpful.
There's another area where the book got me thinking about routine, and it's that in songwriting, the reason that songs appeal to us is that they follow patterns, and certain chord progressions are very pleasing to us. But then what makes a good song to a great song, or at least a predictable song to an interesting song, are the deviations from that. And you talk about a couple times when, with some of the songs, like with the tempo of Knocking on the Door, it increases, and the way you write about it is something like the song demanded that. What do you mean?
There are rules when it comes to songwriting math, which is, the verse should take so long, and if you're trying to write a great pop song, you don't want to wait till a minute and 45 seconds to get to the chorus. There are certain
Right.
rules, and there's also certain rules when it comes to like how repetitive things should be and how repetitive things shouldn't be. So it's like you want to have just enough repetition so something is familiar, but you don't want to be too repetitive that people get annoyed by it. That said, within that framework, there's lots of mysterious and interesting directions you can go. Now I'm thinking about like the Dixie Chick song, I'm Not Ready to Make Nice. Do you remember that song?
Yup.
For whatever reason.
The Chicks, now the Chicks.
The Chicks, that's right.
Chicks. Yes, yes.
In the middle of the second verse, it launches into some like instrumental orchestra part, which makes no sense, but is actually the most compelling part of the song. Dun, 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 dun. It's like, why is that instrumental part happening before the second chorus? And when they're writing that song, they're just like, it just kind of demands it. That's what we need to do. And so that's what makes songwriting so interesting, is that there are rules, but you can break them if it feels right. And what feels right is subjective.
When you were writing Knocking on the Door, when you say it demands it, do you mean it just happens? Or that's an interesting story of how you wrote that song and how it was like a third of a song and it got huge before it was even complete. And by the way, I've read stories about how Foreigner had Hot Blooded just the chorus and they had nothing else. Although, is that song anything but the chorus? And they would just play the chorus and the fans would go nuts and they're like, we gotta do something else with this song. So that's an analog. But yeah, that's my question about Knocking at the Door. Knocking at the Door. Were you saying to yourself, there's something here? Or was it more, it just happened? You're like, that's right.
Well, the bridge breaks down to this sort of like gospel-y part, and then it has this big crescendo buildup. And we realized that the natural energy of that big crescendo buildup made the tempo go faster. And it made the tempo go faster for the final chorus. So do we just keep the tempo at that speed that we've arrived at? Or do we drop it back out of principle because the principle is songs shouldn't change?
Yes.
The principle is like, it's like songs shouldn't change in tempo. But...
Right.
And actually what I've learned recently, and this is a new lesson I just learned, is Dan Nigro, who's the producer of Olivia Rodrigo and Chappell Roan, famously in Chappell Roan's song Good Luck Babe, the tempo goes from like 118 in the verses to 116 in the choruses, which is sort of strange and unusual.
Yeah.
But he explains it. He goes, you know what? You just want to sink into that chorus a little bit, and you can't quite do it if it stays at 118. So the choruses are 116 and the verses are 118. And I'm like, you can, and I'm learning this. I'm learning this 6 months ago. I'm like, you can do that. I didn't know you could do that, but I guess you can do that.
Huh? Does that? No listener will consciously experience that, right?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. That's interesting.
But it felt good. Clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. What about bigger changes? Bigger changes in tempo. I know Franz Ferdinand, Take Me Out, or something like that.
Yeah, those are rare, and if you can pull them off, great, but very rare. That's like
that's almost like a day in the life change of tempo.
Totally. That's like kind of two different songs pieced together.
Right. Have you ever done one like that?
Have we ever done? We have a song called Agent Zero off our second record, which is about Gilbert Arenas and some gunplay.
Sure. And I think we talked about it once on the show.
Yeah, we read it. And then the second half turns in. It starts into this sort of moody, minor key, dreamy thing, and then the second half is this like Fleetwood Mac kind of upbeat feeling. And so that's a version of like kind of two songs in one.
You've done slow, fast songs, right? You've done your Freebirds, you've done your Pixies, Nirvana type songs.
Yeah. So what is slow, fast songs?
Well, it's just the Pixies idea that Nirvana took, that you start off slow, you keep it slow, and then once you get fast, it is very pleasing and becomes a fantastic song.
Yeah, that trick's great.
The other one, though, is the fast, slow song, which is Layla. I don't know if you've ever done one like that.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever done anything like that. The dramatic, outro moment. No.
And is Layla two different songs, do you think?
It kind of is.
That
it is
happen
kind
to
of
work?
Yeah, it totally is.
See, I thought Freebird really, the slow part suggests the fast part, but it's very hard to do slow fast. Why would it happen? I don't know. Maybe when band members are stealing each other's wives or something that.
Yeah, that's right.
That yields that. When you're writing a song, when do you bring the bandmates in?
This kind of goes back to something we touched on earlier, where I don't really have a particular process for writing a song. And so, sometimes the guys send me instrumental pieces and I write to that. And that's a really satisfying way to write. And it's different for me because I don't know what the chords are. And my ear is not so good that I'm going, oh, he's going from the 1 to the 4 to the minor 6 to I don't think, I just hear the piece of music, and if it grabs me, I can start humming stuff over top. So
but to interrupt, you also wrote a book and recently admitted on your podcast you don't know the difference between nouns and adjectives.
Oh my God, you listen to that? Yeah, there's a lot
and
of
then
technical
you said
stuff.
Adverbs, and this is why you're friends with those guys who are like, well, no one knows what adverbs are. Come on, don't be crazy, Max.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I don't know. So for instance,
Suspiciously, it does not know about adverbs.
Can we stop talking about this? Make me uncomfortable. There's a song off our record, Laundry Pods. The last song on the record is a beautiful piano composition that Mike wrote. Our guitarist wrote this piano composition. And I don't know what the chords are, but I just wrote some words over top of it and some melodies, and that's how that song began. And we have other songs, that Tony started. And Knocking at the Door was started by Tim's drum beat, and I was playing along to that. So, and sometimes it's just me sitting at the piano, with some chords and some melodies. So, and sometimes it's working with an outside producer or songwriter that starts an idea. So I do like this idea that like a song can start from anywhere. And when you think about hip hop, that whole genre is just like, in many cases, just taking a sample from another song and creating a whole other thing from it. So we're not inventing the wheel on any level. It just, I think rock bands sometimes feel pigeonholed to like a certain way of making a song.
Do the other guys in the band, are they always happy to go along with your harebrained schemes, the choreography, flying to Korea on a whim? I mean, this is something that you and manager Ash decide. And then, you hope the other guys are like, yes, we will come to Korea with you, Max. Or whatever, the choreography, the laundry shtick, everything.
Yeah, no, I think, it's a pretty supportive unit. And I think there's plenty of cases where they've said, Max, is that really a good idea? And then I have to stop and I go, it's not a good idea. I want to make it clear, for every 3 ideas they get through, there's probably 30 that we were like, that doesn't really make sense, or we shouldn't do that. So I do like using the guys as a bit of a litmus test for certain things. And if they go, Max, that's a bit much, I go, okay, fine, we shouldn't do it because I know that they're tolerant of the ideas, and also, they add to the ideas too. It's just not like, I remember we had this choreography bit for our song Saturday Night, and Mike, who I don't think of as a dancer, was like, no, the dance moves need to be like this. I'm like, okay, cool, great. No, the guys are great. And also, it's like, one of the most sort of theatrical moments in the set is Tony's piano solo. And all this kind of great choreography happens around it. In a big band kind of way with the horns, and we're all surrounding Tony, and he does this really theatrical boogie woogie piano solo, and that's all because Tony can do it. Having that skill set allows us to take on these bigger moments.
I think I've asked you this in the past, but I want another crack at it. Does it surprise you that guitar-based rock has declined so much as a genre of music? Or maybe I think maybe in Canada it hasn't declined as much, but here in the United States, yeah. You ask a 15-year-old, they don't want to listen to anything with a guitar. My kids do, but many don't.
Yeah, the change in music culture is really interesting. That's been happening over the last probably 30 years. And also, I should say that there's a lot of bands that have great careers and that are very guitar forward. There's a lot of and there's a lot of folk rock that's very popular. Mount Joy, who are friends of ours, they're playing Madison Square Garden. So it's not like it's totally gone.
Hosier. I've never heard of him. No one had, and he breaks huge, and now he's playing Madison Square Garden.
Totally.
Right? Yeah.
So I do think in part. There's probably a few things. One is that the new generation always wants to do something that's different from the last. So
right.
I think
and pop music, rock music, whatever, popular music is rebellion.
It's rebellion. So that's number one. Also, I think it is just a chore in our modern age to pick up your amp and walk it down the street to your friend's house and find the chord and not annoy your friend's parents and who's got the drum kit. It's a lot of work. It is so much work to get a band together and do stuff. Whereas if you're making hip hop or pop music or electronic music, you can do so much of it by yourself in your bedroom on a computer, and it can sound as good as anything. So I think there is, and also it's like learning the guitar even is a bit of a chore when you can just like make beats and you can learn a couple chords and you can manipulate a lot of things on the computer. And by the way, I'm not denigrating that style of music. I love that style of music, but I think just as an exercise, it's just way more annoying to do stuff in a band setting.
And hip hop's great, and we wouldn't want to take anything away from the popularity of hip hop. It deserves it as the genre that replaced rock as the number one genre in popular music. It deserves its place. But I just thought when I was, I don't know, from 8 to 28, that rock music is kind of pop music, and it's been shown not to be true. And sometimes I wonder, I play this crazy exercise, and sometimes I ask my friend Chris Malamphy about this. I don't know if you know Chris. He writes about the Billboard charts. Would this song have ever been written today? Would this group of fantastic musicians be writing in the genre of rock? I'll give you two of them. Would The Cure be writing rock music, knowing what we know about them and their predilections? And those same guys grow up in England. They're inspired by what's going on around them. I don't think that. I think they write music. They're musical geniuses. I don't know if they're rock musicians.
It's a great question. Funny enough, you say like Canada still has an appreciation for guitar music, and I don't know if that's totally true, but the UK,
yes,
their rock scene still thrives, and Sam Fender, who's sort of like the British Springsteen, and the 1975, who are the most sort of inventive art rock pop songwriters, they're headlining festivals. So I think to answer your question about The Cure, I imagine The Cure might still be interested in rock music. That'd be my assessment of The Cure.
A specific song I also was thinking of, I was listening the other day. I'm like, it's familiar. Maybe we laugh about it, but I love it. The solos are great. 25 or 621. Wow. How does that exist today? That Chicago song. You know it? I can't see who is writing. Billie Eilish writing that song? Even the Gaslight Anthem writing it? Who's writing that song?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's so much going on, and even though I'm in the industry, I go, what? Who's that? Oh, that person? That person is playing the amphitheaters now? Okay. So it's nothing really surprises me these days. And so there's this Icelandic artist named Laufey, whose music I know a little bit, and she's huge. And she makes this sort of like cinematic, almost like Disney music. And I could be getting that wrong. But I remember a friend opened for her, and it was just like, it's like, this is the thing that's like really popular. So it's more, because there's no gatekeepers working in the music industry really anymore. Before, if you were signed to the right label and that label had the right connections with the record stores and MTV, you had a path for being famous and being successful. Because there's payola, and the executive from one company just hung out with the executive from the other company. But now, it's like, is the algorithm in your favor? And that's how careers can grow, Yeah.
By the way, Iceland, country of 400,000 people, Bjork, Sigur Rós, the musician they're punching above their weight. They're giving the world way more music than, a country essentially the size of Aurora, Colorado.
Yeah, it's true.
I wonder why. So before we even started, we were talking about my background and doing things on Instagram, and you love the marketing and you get juiced and excited by it, because I don't love the fact that I have to, or I get to, it is my opportunity to do a lot of video. I didn't get into this to do video. I'm using video to allow people to discover what I quote unquote really do, which is this podcast and maybe now the Substack gist list. But it's sort of a means and a tool that I have to put up with. And if I'm a professional, that's what you do. But I don't sense that you have that relationship with any of your marketing or video or anything else.
No,
how do I take your mindset?
Okay, I want to push back just a little bit. I don't know if I love marketing. Sometimes I enjoy it, but I don't know if I love it. it. And also I do envy art. Sometimes I think about like somebody like Phoebe Bridgers or something who's so cool. And Phoebe Bridgers could sneeze and people would cover it. It'd be so much easier to just to think about the songs and think about the show and not worry about how do we get the word out about the songs in the show. But so to answer your question, because I've been wondering about you, Mike, because I've been impressed that you've taken these strides. I'm like, okay, he's in the Substack world. He's venturing on different podcasts, but also this video component, because this is a question we're all asking ourselves, like, how do we cut through in a culture that is so cluttered? And for me, and this is what I would say to anybody, is that it's like you just have to figure out how to make it enjoyable, because I have such a low pain tolerance. I really get sleepy the second I am asked to do something I don't want to do. Like I need a nap if I'm doing something I don't want to do. I just literally fall asleep. And so it's then the question becomes, how do you make it pleasurable? And so it's like if they said, hey Max, TikTok is a dance app and you have to just learn the dances, I'd go, okay, I need a nap. I just need a nap. I wouldn't want to do it. But now I go, okay, how do I interact with TikTok in a way that feels authentic to me and my interests, and that looks like something I could be proud of? So I don't know what that answer is for you. And I'm sure you're following a rubric of this is what podcasters do. There's a few different ways, and it is limited in some ways. It's okay, we're going to document the interviews that we have, and we're going to put it the most compelling piece of it on socials, and hopefully that's a thing. I don't, but I also wonder if we were to brainstorm, is there something else that you would just like to see yourself that feels artful and feels representative of you, that could also get the word out about your show? So this, you're taking a step in the right direction, but I do wonder, what is that thing for Mike Pesca that feels just real to him?
It's okay. I'm glad you said this, because you unlocked something in my head. I think with some of the other non-RSS feed versions of what I do, I'm into the Substack. I think that there are elements of creativity, certainly. And the reason is that I'm a consumer of the Substacks out there, and I like some of these other newsletters, and I have thoughts on some of these other newsletters, and I say, I can do that better. But when it comes to Instagram, it is a playground that I don't go to. I guess I don't have kids, right? And I would get looked at askance. And I've seen people who are good at Instagram, and I definitely don't say I don't get it, or I don't say I don't respect it. Kyla Scanlon, who's this economist who we had on the show, she does a great job on Instagram. But for me to look at that and say, oh, here's some critiques I have, here's how I could make it better, I just don't think of Instagram that way. Maybe do you think I could? Or because I've also heard people very successful. I interviewed it's going to be coming up. I'm funny you should mention this rapper who's an improv rapper, and he's brilliant, and he has a pretty big Instagram following. And his whole thing was, I'm just going to let the professional put that all together and not even think about it, and I could concentrate on the thing I do. And that's how I want my Instagram to work. But maybe I have to start thinking about it more as, an active. Just start having more commitment and faith in it. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a couple of things here. And by the way, every career is different, and every career has its own hurdles. And so it's I'm almost reticent to give other comparisons of things at work, because everyone's in their own boat. And for you, it's you are, writing and producing your show 5 days a week, and you have these other podcasts, and you're writing. It's I honestly don't know how you have any time in your day to do anything. Your mind, Mike, works so fast. And I go, oh my God, I can't keep up with Mike Pesca. That said, think about, I've actually been kind of impressed with the way the New York Times is documenting Ezra Klein right now.
Yeah.
And Ezra, who I never thought of as somebody with sort of star power, when he's lit.
He didn't seem terribly exciting, does he? But then, you're right. But then, now he has a cool new haircut.
He's got a cool haircut. He shows up on my TikTok, and he's in this beautifully lit New York Times studio. And I'm sure that production, there's probably 12 people making that thing happen. And that works for Ezra Klein. So it's like, what is going to be the thing for you that feels grabby and gets like that makes you shine? Because I think that's because I know what it is about you that is charming and funny and interesting and earnest and curious and sweet. Like when I think about you, Mike Pesca, I think of all those things and really smart and lively. So
not only are Canadians nice, they think everyone else is nicer than they really are.
No, but I mean that you are, Mike. Mike, no, you are sweet. You are such a sweet person. And then the question becomes, how do you present that? Like how do people who are just coming across you get that feeling? And it's not a specific question for you. It's a specific question for me because I'm sure people have ideas of what I'm like if they only get like my headshot, or if they only see 3 seconds of me on a passing Instagram. So I don't know what it is the answer, but it's just like, how do you get the best out of who you are in video form? I don't know. You should keep trying though. Like I think there's a way to do it.
It's a good thought exercise, and I appreciate you having thought about it and playing around with me on this. And this is how a version of this is, I would assume, parallels many conversations you have with many of your friends where you're asking yourself or they're talking to you about these exact questions as related to your career.
Well, I talk to my friends all the time in bands about like, little like creative problem solving. I just want to look at your Instagram for a second.
I should do this with all my guests. When I had on Stanley McChrystal, I can't believe I didn't throw these questions at him. That guy's very regimented.
And I wonder, it's like, I'm just making up shit right now, so don't take anything I say seriously. But like, is that curtain behind you that you're fretting about? Should that be a light green? I don't know. And by the way, I'm bad at like interior design, but I'm like, but I wonder, like, is that, should you have a ring light? Do you have a ring light on?
I have, let's see.
What?
I have this thing.
What do you got?
Oh, wait. I can't really tilt the camera. But yes, I have several lights. I'll show you this. This is... Oh, no. This is big. I'm not backlit. Oh, my God. I was supposed to be backlit the whole time. And, it's actually attached to the chair down here. And so... that's supposed to be how it looked.
Yeah. Anyway, I just wonder. And by the way, who gives a fuck? Like Mike, you're so great, and your writing and your pod really speaks for itself. But just like wondering, it's like, how do you sort of like wring out all of it just to give yourself the best chance only for the purpose of people sharing the pod? So I don't know. And you're not the only one in this boat. Everybody with a podcast, Bill Simmons has probably asked himself the same question.
You put your finger on something. When you do it and you like it, I think you don't think of it as solely a means to an end. When you're planting tickets around Red Deer as a fun exercise for fans to get free tickets to the show, you're not saying, all right, I'm only doing this to serve the greater purpose of fans going to the show. You're actually liking the process of some of the marketing,
there's something interesting to me
outreach.
About like with that particular example. We were playing this festival in Red Deer, and this volunteer for the festival picked us up from the airport. Gary, I sat in the front with Gary. Gary, what do you do? He's a retired farmer. Oh, that's interesting. Gary, could you help us with this? I just want to plant some tickets around town. Do you have any ideas where we could plant the tickets? Oh, okay, I can take you some spots. And I kind of just enjoyed that part of my day. So it's like, because it's like, I do think you work more and you work happily if you are enjoying what you're doing. And I think that's why a lot of bands come to an end, because they stop putting out music as consistently as they should. It's not because they're like lacking songs. It's because they've stopped enjoying it. So it's like, so then the question is like, okay, how do you just enjoy the day? Because when you enjoy it, you just tend to do more.
One last thing, you mentioned Phoebe Bridgers. What about a supergroup? Could there be who would Kerman pair with? What two others? Maybe one Canadian, one American. Who would be a good supergroup for you?
Okay, the supergroup. I think I'd go with Doechii and Bruno Mars. Are you familiar with Doechii?
No.
Okay. I know we were talking about hip hop earlier. The best late night performance that I've seen in the last 10 years was Doechii on Colbert. Watch it. It'll blow you away. It's the most artful thing, the most ambitious thing I've seen. in a very long time. And then she did a Tiny Desk concert. It's Doechii, I want to say. She's from Florida. And she, in the last 6 months, those performances have catapulted her. And it's so satisfying to me because we live in this era where it's like someone can like set up their iPhone and play a song on an acoustic guitar and people go gaga over it. I'm like, there's nothing interesting about that to me. But Doechii and the level of care she's put into her performances, she was on the Grammys too, but watch Colbert and watch Tiny Desk, and it's next level. So Doechii and Bruno Mars, because I want to learn his dance moves.
Yeah. Yeah. And he hasn't come out with a new song in years, and he's more popular than ever. It's weird.
He's put out a couple singles. He has a Lady Gaga song that somehow is the most popular song on planet Earth. But I'm like, who's listening to that song? And I think he's big in the Philippines. I think there's a lot of clips in the Philippines. Yeah,
he's right. there are full Bruno Mars farms. But by the way, he's the answer to my question. Who would write this song now? It's almost always Bruno Mars. I'm like,
it's always Bruno Mars.
Yeah, September by Earth, Wind, and Fire. Oh, yeah, that'd be Bruno Mars. It would definitely be September. Yeah. All right, Max, I really appreciate it. As always, I enjoyed this little foray into, giving me some advice on my lighting. It was incredible. Max Kerman is lead singer of Arkells and main songwriter of Arkells, and now the author of Try Hard, Creative Work in Progress. Thank you so much. As always, Max.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.